So there's a book I want to talk about, and it's called From Witchcraft to Christ by Doreen Irvine. I've just read it. It's not the first time I've read this book. I actually read it when I was a credulous 15-year-old back in school. This was actually part of the reading curriculum on our religious education class back in high school. And it's the testimony of someone who had a very disadvantaged childhood, went to London, got involved in prostitution, and became a stripper called Daring Diana, and from there got involved in witchcraft, and finally, after drug abuse and everything, heroin addiction, some jail time, she became a Christian and turned her life around. Now this stuck in my mind, this book, and I'm actually amazed by how much of it I actually remembered from when I was 15. And I guess it's fair to say that it coloured my opinion of the occult in the intervening years. But nowadays I'm somebody who knows a little something about the occult. And if you've been a long time subscriber of mine, you'll know that I often talk about it. So I've got some knowledge of the occult from reading books like the Satanic Bible and whatnot. And something just didn't sit right about this woman's testimony with me, so I decided to reread the book. And now I know there's going to be some of the Christians who watch my videos, you're just itching to press the thumbs down because you know how I roll. You know I don't accept your worldview. But just hold on a second, hear me out first, okay? I'm going to talk about some of the things that this woman says. She got involved in Satanism, or what she calls Satanism, through, the way she describes it is, one evening in the strip club she was eavesdropping on a conversation between these two girls. And it was a conversation about a local satanic temple, or something to that effect. So she said, "What is this?" And the two girls said, "Well, we're not supposed to talk about it." And with a little bit of prodding, the girls finally gave in and said, "Well, if you really want to come, we'll take you along." So she was blindfolded, and she was given a lift to this secret location, where there were 500 people in a hall. The hall was draped in black, and there was like people up at the front with ominous-looking robes on and everything, and there was a cockerel was slaughtered, and afterwards someone whom she calls the chief Satanist approached her and asked her if she wanted to become a Satanist, and she did. That's the beginnings of the stuff about Satanism in the book, but it's really hard to take this person seriously if you're someone who knows something about the occult. And I'll illustrate. First of all, Doreen Irvine doesn't seem to know anything about the occult. She refers to this guy who's leading the proceedings as the chief Satanist. She seems to have no awareness of titles like High Priest or Ipsissimus, genuine titles from occult lore. She just uses the unimaginative title, the Chief Satanist, because it's all she seems to know. She refers to the organization as the Order of Satanism at one point, but she doesn't seem to realize that an order is actually a subdivision of an organization which is never named. Is it the Order of Satanism of the organization Satanism? And she's in a position now to blow the lid off this stuff. At one point she calls it the most ancient order of Satanism, which is a contradiction to what she said before. So she doesn't even name it, and there's no such title. Later in the book, she's initiated further, and she's given the title the Queen of Black Witches. Now the book was written in the 70s. We are now in the internet age where information is so easy to obtain. There is no such title in occult lore called the Queen of Black Witches. It just doesn't exist. So there's a lot more than this. I mean, she talks about some of the rules of Satanism that she was given, and one of them is utmost secrecy, that no one is allowed to reveal the location of Satanist temples or to bring outsiders in. And yet all she had to do to get access to literally the inner sanctum of this thing, all she had to do was say to a couple of members, "Oh, go on, let me come. And here she is among 500 people, in a Satanist temple, whatever a Satanist temple is. She talks about how sometimes they move the location in order to preserve secrecy. But later in the book, after she becomes a Christian, she seems to have no problem reconnecting with all her old cronies. And, because she makes an attempt later to try and convert them to Christianity. So how does she get back into it again after she left it? It's this super secret organization that no one today even knows about, and yet she just waltzes back in. At one point, this is actually during the initiation where she becomes the Queen of Black Witches, she has to walk through a bonfire. And she talks about how she fearlessly walks in, and Satan actually manifests before her and guides her through it as a black figure. And everybody watches, and this is the event that happens that causes everyone to give her the title, the Queen of Black Witches. At another point, she actually describes how she was on the moor with other witches, and some men were coming over the hill, and she turned all her pals invisible. Now, maybe there's a Christian listening to me and saying, "Well, how do you know it didn't happen? How do you know it didn't happen? Were you there?" But this is where we have to ask ourselves, what criteria do you actually use to judge fact from fiction? When someone just tells me a fantastic story, I don't just automatically believe them because they say, "Oh, we're a brother in Christ, I'm a sister in Christ," or whatever. I need a little something more than that. You've heard of the phrase wolves in sheep's clothing, haven't you? There's more. She constantly refers to Satan as Lucifer. And she's talking about Satan as a real being, She calls him Lucifer. Now, we all know, at least those of us that have studied the Bible in some depth, we know that Lucifer is a Roman god. There is no word Lucifer in the Bible, except in a mistranslation that happened from Greek to Latin. Way back, I don't know what century it was. But you know what I'm saying? A mistranslation in the book of Isaiah. So, he's not called Lucifer. So the real Satan, who doesn't really exist, but let's say he did. The real Satan isn't called Lucifer. That's a Roman god. She also refers to him as Diablos, and she completely spells it wrong. The Queen of Black Witches, she spells it wrong. It gets even more ludicrous when she's having exorcisms done upon her. This is when she gets delivered from all this, and demons are cast out of her. One of the demons is called doubt. So, when you doubt, that's not your brain's way of making sure you're not making a mistake by demanding that you look at the evidence conscientiously and make a decision based upon evidence. Doubt is a demon in you. A demon that's working on you. It's Satan trying to make you disbelieve. So, there's a lust demon, of course. There's a very common one, but it sort of tickled me that there was an actual demon called lesbian. And so all you gays out there, you're all possessed, right? So it just gets a bit ludicrous after a while. But do you know what really stood out for me? And this is particularly important given the fact that this was written in the 1970s and not the 1980s. The letters SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse, the craze that happened in the late 1980s and early 1990s that gave rise to what we now call the Satanic Panic, where there were all these testimonies of people who had apparently been ritually abused in satanic cults when they were young. Well, there's absolutely no mention of anything like this in the whole book. Why? Because it wasn't in the zeitgeist then. It wasn't something people were thinking about back then when they were making up their little stories. This is a classic example of telling porkies for Jesus. I mean, I rest my case. It's ludicrous. It's utterly ludicrous. But the most disappointing fact about it all is that this book is ultra successful. It's still in print. In fact, it's out now with a nice snazzy looking modern cover. I don't know how many copies it has sold, but apparently it's a real major seller. So Doreen Irvine has certainly profited very nicely from this. And I recommend you actually look her up on YouTube, because there are videos of her giving her testimony. And, bear in mind the information that I've communicated here, and just listen to this sweet old lady giving her testimony about her conversion to Christ. When her past it's either a pack of lies, or else she's grossly exaggerating something stupid that happened to her. Because it's like she has no more knowledge than what she would gain from watching a couple of Hammer horror movies or reading a couple of Dennis Wheatley novels or something like that. She knows nothing about the real occult. And that is the most damning thing about this book. And to you folks watching, the lesson to you is this: what criteria do you use to judge fact from fiction?